From being hailed as one of the best fighters in the UFC to getting cheating allegations stamped on you, Islam Makhachev has seen quite a lot in just a few weeks. But what really is the allegation? It all started with Alexander Volkanovski's city kickboxing teammate Dan Hooker accusing Islam of cheating against his friend. His allegation was that Islam had used an IV drip before fighting Volkanovski, and that calls for an inquiry against the lightweight champion. In a string of tweets, he called out Islam, saying he had flown to Australia and then hired a nurse to administer an IV drip to him. Hooker also very sarcastically pointed out, saying that he thought that the team wouldn't find out that he did it. Even called him a cheating dog. Hooker also took shots at the USADA, which is responsible for implementing penalties in place for use of IV drips. My question, and quite honestly a concern, is why are other people trying to come to Volkanovski's defense? Why is Dan Hooker more concerned about Islam's ways when Volkanovski isn't? And as far as I can remember, he was very professional even after losing to Islam.
Let's give a round of applause for Islam.
I'm here with the featherweight champion, Australia's own. Volk, that was an incredible fight. I mean, that was the toughest fight of his career.
He even congratulated him and appreciated his skill set. If there was a problem, I'd say the main man should have addressed it himself. Well, he did agree with Dan, but even then, he wasn't as vocal as he was. And to be really fair, the problem isn't even that big an issue. An IV drip, short for intravenous drip, is a very common way to deliver fluids directly into a person's veins, and it's not even that bad. IV drips are typically used when a person is unable to take fluids or medications orally, or when they require rapid delivery of medications or nutrients. But it's also used to rehydrate someone who's been dehydrated for several reasons. So, at the base of it, it's nothing that bad. Unless you consider what it means for a UFC fighter. Given that most fighters go through a weight cut procedure before their fights to meet the required weight limit, in such a case, an IV drip can be a lot of help. Until the year 2016, they were actually being regularly used in the MMA community by almost everyone. Because, as you can see, it's not something really bad. Yet, however, it was somehow still banned the same year, following a rule change. Why? Because while the fluid intake itself isn't harmless, the conditions players made while depending on it definitely were. One of which is cutting weight to an unbelievable amount just because they could eventually take some drips and get going once again. But apart from that, it's also been said that these drips can cover up the usage of other drugs that the players might take by shadowing them. So yes, of course, it called for a rule change. However, you can still take some of it if you'd like, 100 milliliters to be exact, during a 12-hour period at minimum. But Eugene Bareman, who's trained Volkanovski, is still siding with Dan. When asked about it at the MMA Hour and how Dan Hooker accused Islam about it, Bareman was first hesitant but then kind of nodded to what Hooker had said. He explained that he and his team had credible information about an IV drip usage, but that's where the twist comes in. Even with having this information, he said that he couldn't go all in on Islam because there wasn't any proof of it. So wait a minute, Hooker has been leveling these allegations without any solid proof? I think so, yes. Because like Bareman pointed out, that even if he did use an IV, there's no way of saying that he did without testing. And while it's already allowed to use a certain amount of it, so then it nullifies the whole argument, don't you think?
Hooker set the world on fire on Monday when he had mentioned that Islam cheated. Is there anything that you can say about this? Do you have the same information? Do you believe that he cheated? Do you believe that he took an IV before the fight?
We have reliable information. You can actually take an IV before a fight. It just has to be 100 mils saline every 12 hours. If it's only 100 mils, you're going to use it within 12 hours. Why would you even bother?
It's really just a debate of how much was used until relevant authorities can investigate the matter, for which, by the way, there's already some interesting developments out there. For example, the Western Australia Commission has already said that there's absolutely no conclusive evidence for such an allegation. Evidence to suggest that any of the fighters used IVs to cheat. And of course, the fans are divided. Some say that he cheated, plain and simple, while some say that Eugene Bareman was unable to fathom that his students lost to Islam. Yes, I said students because it's not just Volkanovski who's lost a match against Islam. Back in 2021, even Dan Hooker was unlucky enough to face defeat in the face of the Russian fighter. Could it be that he's still salty about that? But of course, when you level such accusations, true or not, you also have to face the heat. And so, Ramzan Magomedov, manager for Khabib and co-manager for Islam, jumped to his defense. He said, and I quote, "Jealous losers speeding lies. Eventually, this is all you can do." And in addition to that, in a recent interview with MMA Junkie, Magomed Magomedov responded to Dan Hooker's accusations by calling them BS. According to Magomedov, Hooker is simply seeking attention and has a salty attitude due to his loss in the fight. And I think that's all backed by how Behrman treated the whole thing. He even told MMA Hour that he had advised Hooker not to do what he did. Behrman acknowledged that there were some holes in the information, but also enough evidence to suggest that something may have been going on. Behrman went on to clarify that he believes it's possible that either Makhachev or teammate Zubera Tukogov could have been improperly using IVs. Tukogov had missed weight by 1.5 pounds for his lightweight contest, then went on to lose by split decision. Behrman stressed that if anyone on his team was doing something illegal, he would immediately distance the team from that person. But while saying all that, much like Volkanovski, he congratulated the winning team and expressed pride in his own fighter. In the end, Behrman advised everyone to focus on the fight and not to worry too much about the accusations, stating that the sport should be played on an even playing field. But having said that, he never completely let go of it, and I know that he's holding it in until proper proof can come out. But with the West Australian Commission already saying what it did and Islam pointing at the USADA, I feel like nothing much in Dan's favor is gonna come out. And while we're at it, yes, Islam did engage in the whole fiasco. When asked about how some famous fighters had accused him of using IV to recover prior to his fight, he said that he didn't want to comment. He believes that there are experts out in the field whose job it is to investigate and find out about this. He said that while obviously pointing at the USADA. Islam also explained that he was tested 4 times before and after the fight. Yes, you heard that right, 4 times. It also explains the picture that's doing the round on social media showing his bruise. Talking in reference to that, the Australian Commission also tested him a day before the shoot where the bruised picture was taken. So there you have it. That pretty much explains what Islam had to say, and the recent report by the WAC also says the same. Let's wait and see what USADA has to say. Oh, and by the way, Islam also topped a list that USADA recently released of the athletes around the world who got tested the most last year, with a whopping 8 times. Dan Hooker was not even on the list. And that wraps up whatever has developed yet in this story.